in the newsroom. The stepped-up shelling of Homs began last Friday. This was before the Russians and Chinese had vetoed a watered-down Syria resolution at the UN. It's continued ever since. The tales are harrowing. Families forced to move to the lower floors of buildings, makeshift infirmaries and apartments, funerals by night to avoid sniper fire. These are the kinds of stories witnessed in Sarajevo 2 decades ago. Stories from a city the victim of indiscriminate shelling, say witnesses. Why Homs? Why now? With the Russians sticking by their guns, is the West going to bypass the UN? And who to support on the inside of Syria? What with Syria's opposition fragmented between local activists, exiled, and armed insurgents. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at that massacre in Homs, and with us to talk about it, Syrian activist Majed Aid, who's here with us. Thank you for being with us. Anton Kozlov, who teaches at the American Graduate School of International Diplomacy. From Washington, Bilal Saab of the Monterey Institute of International Studies. And Chris Phillips, who lectures on Middle East politics at Queen Mary University of London. Thank you for joining us as well. The France 24 debate Facebook page, where many of you have been weighing in on the topic on this Monday, and on Twitter, where our handle is @FrancoisF24. With activists too scared to check into hospitals, it's too early for a precise estimate of how many have been killed since Friday, but the sense of urgency is real, like in this amateur video posted this morning and that has since, you could say, gone viral. It was posted by a Syrian-British activist.
Look at the bodies! Look at the bodies! These are rockets. They've been firing at rockets at us for 2 hours now. We've got more than 30 people dead, hundreds of injuries. Look at the civil hospital. Look, all dead bodies all over the place. Look, dead bodies all in the hospital. Our Arabic speaker. We're not animals. We're human beings. We're asking for help. We're asking for your help. They're hitting us with rockets. They've been non-stop with us rockets for 4 hours now. They're going to kill us all. If you don't help us, they'll kill millions. And no one will find out about us. Please, someone help us. This is Homs Barbara, February the 6th.
All right, please help us, that impassioned plea there from that British Syrian activist. When you look at those images, Majed Aid, do you have the sense that there is a new sense of urgency over the past 48 to 72 hours?
Yes, of course. It's like it's accelerating in a very bloody way. Very organized killing for the people, bombing cities, bombing civilians, residential areas, killing people in a very brutal way. The urgency, it was raised like 11 months ago, and it was accelerating every time. It's more urgent, and it's really, there is no more time now. There is no more time. As he said, help us, they are going to kill us all. So, it's accelerating. There is urgency now. The whole international society moves really rapidly, especially after this another bloody veto for the Russian under China. So there is no way now other than bypassing this Security Council. Everything we need really a real help, a fast help. And here we have to thank Mr. Sarkozy for what he proposed. His proposal.
Let's talk about what Nicolas Sarkozy proposed in a moment. I first want to get a sense of why the shelling of Homs is taking place. We can look at a map of the city, and the question begs, and I guess I'll put it to you first, Chris Phillips. Why is it that there has been this stepped-up shelling inside of Homs?
Well, I think if you look at how the regime has reacted throughout this crisis, they have at different times stepped up the military intervention and the military activity against the uprising. Homs has been, parts of Homs anyway, have been out of government control for several months now. And I think that at this particular time, the regime believe that with the diplomatic cover they've been given in the UN, now is the perfect opportunity to try to root out the opposition in Homs and really step up their campaign to try and regain control of the city. I would add that the situation is unlikely to be successful. The regime are unlikely to be successful, as they haven't been successful anywhere else in Syria throughout this uprising. However, the regime clearly do believe that a military solution is the way forward. Ever since the summer, where they attacked Hama, which was the previous city to fall out of government control.
But Chris, once again, Homs in particular, why this city?
Well, because it's been the centre point of the uprising for the last sort of 6 months or so. It started elsewhere, it started in Deraa and spread elsewhere, but Homs has been the focal point of the opposition for a long time. I think the regime believes, a bit like when it massacred over 10,000 people in Hama in a previous uprising in 1982, the regime believes that if it can land a decisive blow against Homs, then it will be able to quash this uprising.
Anton Kozlov, your thoughts on this?
Well, my first thought, first of all, I would like to say one thing. When you started the conversation, you talked about Homs and you made a reference to Sarajevo. I would like to make a reference to the city of Sirte in Libya, which was bombarded by the Syrian National Council and NATO for a few months, and nobody really said anything. It was a very similar situation to begin with. Second of all, I would like to say also that Homs, in fact, is divided in different quarters. There are certain quarters that are taken by the opposition, other quarters are controlled by the army. So the exchange of fire goes both ways. So it's not just the army bombarding and destroying. I mean, there are exchanges of fire. So I think we have to be very cautious. And once again, regarding the attack on Homs, I had seen different reports about this attack, and they're not all necessarily pointing the finger only to the Syrian army. There are also fingers pointed to the armed opposition. So I think we have to be very careful when we discuss that precisely what's going on and why it had happened right on the eve of the United Nations Security Council resolution voting, because we can remember a very similar event in Sarajevo when the market explosion in Sarajevo, which had become the turning point, and in fact many analysts pointed that this explosion was perpetrated by the Bosniak pro-government forces. So I think we have to be very careful, because there is a media war going on, and the information we get, it's very difficult to decide what is true and what is not necessarily so true.
All right, what is true, though, is that there is a lot of shelling going on. Let me ask you, Bilal Saab, Homs' close proximity to the Lebanese border, does that lend credence to what Anton Kozlov just said, that the shooting is not going just in one direction?
Well, possibly. I do agree with the speaker before me that Homs is, at the end of the day, the epicenter of the uprising. So the regime felt that it had to conduct a much more decisive and forceful action towards that city. As far as the Lebanese dynamic is concerned, it's quite ironic for me to hear the Syrian government.
All right, we seem to be technical problems. Let's try to get back on the line with Bilal Saab in a moment there. Apologies for that. Let me ask you on that point, Chris Phillips, strategically, Homs, again, being close to the border with Lebanon, is that a factor?
It is. I think that if you look at the various centres of resistance in the Syrian uprising, they have been close to borders. You've seen Deraa, which is close to the Jordanian border in the south, Jisr Shahur, close to the Turkish border on the north, and then Homs, close to the Lebanese border in the centre of the country. It's quite likely that some opposition fighters are using these countries as bases to resupply themselves and find safe havens. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, as your previous speaker suggested, that reports that the government forces are firing huge numbers of shells and massacring people are therefore untrue. It's almost certain that this is not a one-way fight anymore, and there are some people who are fighting back. However, the disproportionality is great. I heard one report suggest that it is Kalashnikovs versus tanks. The government forces are using artillery shells and tank shells, whilst the few armed members of the opposition, doesn't seem to be that many, but there are some, are firing back with machine guns and small arms fire. So it clearly is some fighting going on between the two forces, but it's hugely disproportionate and greatly weighed in favour on the government side.
Anton Kozlov?
Well, first of all, I didn't say that what you just implied I said. I said that there are exchanges of fire on both sides, and the opposition uses mortar fire. It had been proven. I mean, there are reports of that. So I think we have to be very, very careful. Certainly, the opposition doesn't have the same firepower as the Syrian army, but it had been supplied by Turkey, and it's just a plausible supposition that they use Turkish territory. They do use Turkish territory, and Turkey had acknowledged that. Okay, so let's...
Well, it seems our guest here watches lots of Syrian TV and Iranian TV. This is the first point. Second
I'm sorry, I
point.
don't speak Arabic.
Well, you have your translators. At Dunya TV today, they talked about terrorists putting bombs in the buildings and bombing them and killing the innocent people, their people, to convince the Security Council. This is really, I don't know what to say, any word for that. Anyway. As our guest said from London, it's really the Kalashnikov versus the shells. The Kalashnikov that is taken from the Syrian army. These are soldiers who left the Syrian army before because they refused to kill their innocent people, their families, their brothers, their sisters, their children. We've seen yesterday kids killed by bombs. We've seen Hamza Bakur. He was with half face and he died today. What can we say really? Resisting some regime like this, sitting and talking in this calm way, with a neutral way towards such crimes. This is really inhuman.
Right,
this is really inhuman.
All right,
inhuman.
Bilal Saab, I believe we have the line back with Washington. Bilal, who's shooting at who exactly in Homs?
Well, apologies for being disconnected. I may have missed some crucial moments of the debate. Just to go back to the importance of Hamas, and I do believe, and I agree with the former speaker, that it is the epicenter of the uprising. Therefore, the regime has felt that they needed to act more forcefully and perhaps decisively towards that city. As far as the Lebanese dynamic, you asked me before I got disconnected. It is quite ironic for me to hear the Syrian government criticize the Lebanese government in terms of arms smuggling, given the fact that the Syrian government has refused to demarcate the borders with Lebanon for decades. And now all of a sudden it has backfired. Therefore, it has been the failure of the Syrian government itself to solve that problem a long time ago. And now all of a sudden, obviously, the borders are porous. Criticism of the Syrians has been pretty fierce with regard to the Lebanese government. So I blame the Syrian government solely for that problem. Now, who's shooting at whom? Would you mind please elaborating? I didn't quite get the question.
Well, just Majid Aid just said that it was solely those who are on the side of the insurgency taking Kalashnikovs off of the Syrian army. Is there more to it, though, than that?
To defend their people, to defend their families.
Well, certainly your guest is in a far better position to answer that question. I'm sitting here in Washington. It's quite difficult for me to look at the military dynamics on the ground. But I suspect that the Free Syrian Army had gotten a larger role in terms of commanding and managing the armed insurgency. But its capabilities are still limited, and they are calling for assistance from whether it's Turkey or the Arab governments. Yet there's still that decision has not been made yet, and even in Washington hasn't been made in terms of offering more tangible military assistance to the Free Syrian Army.
All right, a point we'll pick up on in part two. Majid Aid was talking about the reaction of the French president. He spoke earlier in the day in the company of the German Chancellor, and he was quite blunt.
What's happening is a scandal. We won't accept the indecision or the blockage of the international community.
So what does not accepting the indecision mean, in your view, Chris Phillips?
Well, I think what's happened here, unfortunately, is that the Syrian internal crisis has been clearly internationalized, and now you're seeing two sides forming. On the one hand, a coalition of Western states and the Arab League, particularly led by the Gulf states of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, have decided they really want the Assad regime to go. It's tied in with wider factors such as their desire to displace Iran in the region, which of course is Syria's close ally. But they've turned one way and they've decided they absolutely want the Assad regime to fall. On the other hand, on the other side, you have Iran supporting the regime and, of course, Russia and, to an extent, China, who have both blocked the Security Council resolution in recent days by using their veto. What we're finding now is a diplomatic impasse whereby the Russians in particular seem to be saying they will stand by Assad and this current regime to the end and will not consider any situation or sanction any situation at the UN Security Council that allows for any military move or diplomatic move that might topple this regime. And that is in direct contradiction now with what is accepted Western policy of trying to topple the Assad regime. So that is what President Sarkozy means by the diplomatic obstruction.
The move of Russia prompting some strong words from the German Chancellor, who's gone to great lengths in the past to warm ties with Moscow. She was quite outspoken on her trip to Paris here today. Let's take a listen to Angela Merkel.
We were not only disappointed but appalled that we were not able to get approval for a UN resolution. And I have to say here, Russia must ask itself if it really wants a historical situation where policy is made separately from the Arab League. I can't imagine that this will prove to be a big success.
All right, strong words there, but at the same time, the White House coming out with a statement saying that it's focused on pursuing diplomatic and economic measures and that it wants a political solution. Do you feel as though behind all of this talk, there still is room to bring Russia around to some kind of resolution?
Well, I think there certainly is a room because the situation is very simple. Russia refused to accept resolution for a very simple reason, because Russia wanted to continue working on the resolution, and the Russian foreign minister is going to Damascus tomorrow. And Russians asked for a delay on the voting on this resolution, which was not accorded to them, and in fact the resolution was presented in the way unacceptable to Russia. It was quite clear from the start that it's not going to pass. I mean, we discussed that last week, and it was clear back then that it's not going to pass. So why to press with the vote knowing that it's going to be vetoed? I mean, I'm sure there are reasons for that. But I think certainly any military intervention into Syria will create a lot of problems. Therefore, the best way is to find some kind of political solution.
Which is what the U.S. is saying. I'm going to interrupt you, Anton Kozlov, because we're going to take a break. But we'll pick up on this point when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.